Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Centering Justice, Transform the Grind. My name is Hamida Bhagarati. I lead out programs at NU and so glad to have you here with us today. To start us off, I ask as we move into this space, let's take a moment to leave behind the places and spaces we were in perhaps just a few moments ago. Could be meetings, conversations, things that we were holding. And let's collectively take a deep breath in and then slowly release it to transition us all into this space. So before we talk a little bit more about centering justice, I want to take the time to uplift that we are all products of our ancestors, places, and spaces. And I join you today from Ypsilanti on the stolen and occupied lands of the Anishinaabe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi, the three council fires of Michigan, Sauk and Fox and Wyandotte, and land in which contemporary Indigenous peoples continue to live and thrive and contribute to our collective uplift. As a settler who has also experienced a double diaspora from my Indian ancestors being transported to Trinidad in the Caribbean, and then my family migrating from Trinidad to the US, I own that I continue to benefit from this occupation. Words are not enough, but the hope is that they can spur reflection and also subsequently action. So I ask us all to take a moment to reflect on how our geographical pasts inform our present and how we're connected to the land and each other. So centering justice, for those of you who have hung out with us in the past, really started as a program at the beginning of the pandemic, which seems so long ago now, almost 2 years now, to really amplify essential BIPOC voices and uplift the significance of communities of color and not only weathering this pandemic in light of the capitalism and white supremacist movements and oppressive movements that are happening, but also uplifting the dreaming, envisioning, and ideating, implementing that is already happening towards a new, more inclusive and equitable future. And as part of our program, we invite visionaries, storytellers, and healers that encourage and join us to interrupt the status quo and also start or stoke or build our fires to believe in and start acting or continue to act in ways to create a more just and thriving society. During our time together, myself, Yodit Mesvin Johnson, and Carly Friedrich will be helping us move forward a conversation with our speakers, and we'll be closing with invitations and demands from our speakers. So today we're really so excited, inspired, glad to have with us three speakers. Kysha Frazier, she, her, hers, interim director for the Improving Practices and Outcomes at Corporation for a Skilled Workforce, who holds interests in local community-based organizations and employers. We have Amber Fellow, she, any, all pronouns, one of the leaders on What's Left Ipsy, who holds interests in community worker ownership, freedom of movement, and community press. And Katt Ramos, she, her, hers, who serves as a coordinator of Richmond Our Power Coalition. She also has been a grassroots community organizer for nearly 2 decades with a focus on mentorship of youth and developing decolonized curricula for educational cooperatives. So thank you so much all for joining us. So excited for this convo. I will move over to make space for Yodit to give us some grounding.
Thanks, Hamida. I'm so excited. I am coming into space, y'all, today. I have to evoke, I am daughter of Cassandra, granddaughter of Mitzlal and Dolores, great-granddaughter of Christine and Esmalesh. All of these women worked and labored and contributed to nation building in their own right. And I am just so honored to carry their legacy and also burdened by what that legacy meant in a relationship to work. I know that in the land of my elders and ancestors, work had purpose. And that purpose was largely around providing sustenance for family and to ensure that the community was cared for. The land they were on was a vital partner, and nothing was extracted without care for its tending and replacement and nurturance. Work was not for profit. It was for communal, hyperlocal needs being met. And in this season, they would be laying the land to rest. They would be resting themselves as the rainy season embarked in Ethiopia. Work is very different now, and that burden I speak of is also tied to my entanglement in it. I'm coming here today as a seeker, also as a dreamer, and believing that in this space I'll be fed. I know that my body and the bodies of other Black and Brown peoples have been burdened, that our God-given gifts and skills have been extracted from and exploited for profit. I am aware that the transactional repair that we're demanding will never replace the lost joy and dreams of our people. There is no check, there is no acreage that could replace what was lost in that violence. Yet recently at New, we've been experimenting with new ways of working and being. I believe that we are blessed with Hamida and Carly and the 5 other people who joined our team this year, because we are doing things different. And even though people constantly ask me if I'm turning New into a social justice organization, which in and of itself is a coded question, my answer then and now is that New is a human-centered organization. And I will not stop honoring, compensating, resourcing, loving, and caring for the people who choose to work here. Though our work is slower than I would like, we are, in fact, thoughtfully returning to the ways and practices of our collectivist roots. We are challenging our notions of work, the way we work. We are asking deep questions and willing to be vulnerable and honest about our complicity in capitalism, and specifically racialized capitalism. There's an article that circulated, I've sent it to many of you, How to Be an Anti-Racist Supervisor, Start with Changing What You Call Yourself. It was written by Kimberly Monique Jones. And she writes, European management thinkers are credited for identifying the function of supervisors into 5 roles: to plan, organize, coordinate, command, and control. This mechanization of labor and unrelenting drive for production led to long work hours, unsafe working conditions, low wages, and exploitive child labor. Recently, that narrative has been shattered by documented accounts of violently sophisticated business practices that originated from slave plantations of the Caribbean and in the southern states of America. Researcher Caitlin Rosenthal, who's an assistant professor at UC Berkeley, argued that modern management practices, the ways in which supervisors and managers engage with employees, is rooted in, hear this, the soil of plantations rather than the dust and debris of the factory floor. And in her review of slave owners' records, Rosenthal found that modern business practices that are employed by corporations and nonprofits today, the way we create middle managers and performance management and productivity and workforce planning, can all be tracked back to the management of slavery. I too have come to appreciate that my visceral reaction to the title CEO is not related to industrial work. My reaction is ancestral. It's related to slave work. Yet even with a definition and good intentions to reinvent the names of supervisor roles, these matter less than the inherent racist management systems that guide how we interact with our teams. They were designed to value white lives and white livelihood over Black and brown lives and Black livelihood and Black and brown livelihood. The system was designed to demand productivity and profit for the benefit of the slave owner at the physical, mental, and emotional expense of the enslaved. Rosenthal further documents that we inherited these oppressive systems, which includes those titles like oversee, which you will often see in a job description. We could rid ourselves of every title, but to truly rid ourselves of embedded racism in organizational leadership is to envision a new paradigm. I'm entering this space as a worker, as an owner, as an organizational leader, knowing there's a better way and seeking that new paradigm. What would we call ourselves if we were not using terms rooted in oppression? What would we do differently? How would we work if we weren't tethered to racialized capitalistic systems? And by that, I'm not suggesting socialism or any system that we know is the answer, but certainly the system we have is not working. And what I can tell you for sure is that these three amazing humans that agreed to be with us today will inspire us, will challenge us, will expand us, and they absolutely each in their own rights fill my spirit. And I'm so deeply grateful that you said yes. And I look forward to hearing and learning from you today.
Wow, thank you, Yodi and Hamida, for just that wonderful grounding of this space. And so from here, we'd like to transition and give some space for our speakers to introduce themselves. And we always want our speakers to bring their whole selves into the session. And so in that spirit, if we could just have each speaker share some of the communities and identities that they're drawing upon as they enter this space today.
Shall I begin? Okay, my name is Amber Fellows, and just wow, I don't even know how to follow that. It's really amazing to be here. I'm very honored to have been invited. So thank you so much to everyone that's put in work to put this together. And it's a topic that we are so just needing to talk about more. Yeah, so I am coming to this space. I am a multinational person, a child of a Japanese parent, an American parent, working class, and I also came from military growing up, and then afterwards landed in northern Michigan. I moved down to this area almost 20 years ago now. So I've been in Ypsi about 18 years. I was doing a lot of kind of work in nonprofits around that era time, as well as cooperatives, but like ownership cooperatives, member owner cooperatives. And eventually I found myself doing some city government work. I was the chair of the Human Relations Commission in Ypsilanti. And through that role, I was able to see kind of some intergovernmental workings and saw some things that looked like anti-democratic, regressive, corrupt, and that experience and my own housing insecurity in Ypsilanti as a renter was radicalizing, and I had began organizing in about 2017. So since then, I've done a lot of organizing in housing, also challenging kind of like police budgets most recently, and also around labor. So I am just delighted to be here to talk about this issue, and thank you so much.
Can go next. So a good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. I just want to say, first of all, I am so happy. I just saw a box pull up and I see an old friend from high school that joined today. So that just says so much. I'm just thrilled to see if you see that box from Romel. So thanks for joining. And it's touching for me because he can relate to a lot of what I'm going to say. I didn't think I'd get this emotional about that, but so I'm a Black woman, basically, revisiting, I would say, the Great Migration my grandparents before me experienced 50 years before me. And so they took the journey from the South, and I'm doing it in the reverse. So I sit outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, with the experience of growing up in segregated Iowa and a city in Iowa. And that's why it's connecting me so much, because the person who joined understands what that was about. So the city is known for having the greatest BIPOC population, but it's in one of the least diverse states in the country. And pretty much when you think of Iowa, you think of cornfields and cows. That wasn't our experience. When my grandparents and my father got here, it was basically they got dropped off at the end of the Great Chicago Central Rail Line. It was the last stop from the South. And they worked in factories, and that was what was offered to them. I lived in a part of the town really where most of the Black and brown people were secluded and bounded to a section of that town. And it took on many of the challenges and characteristics of the name of that railroad of Chicago. So again, not what you would think about for Iowa. My grandparents took that big trip because they wanted a better life for themselves and their children. And isn't that all what everybody wants? I didn't know I would live a life in workforce policy and practice at that time, but listening to my grandparents when they were alive and talking to my parents today, they show me that people want to be acknowledged for the talent and the skills and the gifts that they bring, but more importantly, they want to be respected for who they are and how, and as they are, really, who they are as they are. And so I bring the spirit and wisdom of my family, like my grandfather, who could only work on the coal foundry of one of the nation's largest companies at that time, or my grandmother, even with a college education, was relegated to clean the university rather than teach at it. My father, who was told not to bother with college by a school counselor, but years later became their boss. And it's that drive for independence and the escape for a better life, the same drive, I'd say, my Cameroon and Nigerian ancestors that I never had a privilege to meet or go back to and find that family also had. Those kind of real experiences that I know many people have, plus having worked in a white dominant workplaces and cultures my entire career, and it's been in education, the private sector, and now in nonprofit policy. I bring that to the conversation, and I hope to share what I've heard from peers, job seekers, workers, as I've worked in this workforce space at the national level, and really learning what they want and what they need when it comes to work. And I intensely am wanting to learn from you today. So thank you. Apologize for that shakiness there, but I am so happy to be invited and joining the conversation.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to my fellow panelists, because I really appreciate internet is a little bit, apologize if it's a little choppy. So Amber said radicalized, and that brought a quote to my mind, and it's something that I end every email that. Let this radicalize by Miriam Kaba. Start there. I was born and raised and empowered in a city that rose from, I'm sorry, it sounds like someone else is talking. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I was born and raised and really empowered in a city that rose from rebellion and is filled with art and tension and this deep, deep desire for freedom. And, there's beautiful murals and a major hope and this heart. And there's also a lot of trauma and a lot of violence and a lot of fear. And that fire and that trauma is intermingled with this really deep love and a knowing of the history of the people that came before me. All of those folks live in my veins. I'm Caribeña with parents from Borinquen and Haiti, and I bring all of my hands seated. Now live and get to do this.
Hi, Kat. If you can hear me, perhaps switching to audio only might help. I know your video is a little bit choppy right now.
Is that better? Hopefully
Yeah,
that
it
works.
does
I'm
sound
sorry,
better.
y'all. Much better. Okay, thank you. So I was saying, in the community that I'm in right now, which is Richmond, California, there's Black, Indigenous, Latina, and Asian peoples all working towards transforming Richmond into a rich city for everyone. And all of these existences have a complicated relationship and often violent relationship to labor. So we're reclaiming power over that in our work and how we structure the vision. Both places, where I come from and where I currently reside, are frontline communities that are impacted by climate disaster. And we're all taking steps towards moving stewardship of that transformation of our city to the community that lives and breathes life into it every day. And so that's everyone that I'm bringing into this space with us right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kat and Kysha and Amber. Again, I feel such gratitude to be in this space with you and with everyone. So let's center a little bit deeper and more and reiterate what brought us and gathers us here today. We're in a time of unprecedented professional churn. Many employers are struggling to retain staff and reflecting on their work cultures. The people leaving say they're searching for work that gives them life and aligns with their values. How can we create just work environments to help every person thrive? So I'll open with a question of, for all three of you, how have your approaches to work and the work environment shifted in the past 2 years or greater if applicable for you?
I can start this off, I guess. As I mentioned, I do work for a national workforce policy organization called Corporation for a Skilled Workforce. So as we are intermediaries, so we work with organizations, either community level, federal, state, that provide support and advice about what's happening at the national level and try to come up with good strategies to make some positive change. And so a couple of things as I was thinking about this question, the researcher in me wanted to dive deeper and see, so what's happening nationally and just a look at the numbers. We know demographically, people of color will be the majority population in just like 25 years. It's not long. And we also know that will represent more than half of the working age population very soon. And it's not that far away. And this is also not new numbers. It's just, I think, in front of folks' eyes. It's because it's imminent. It's right here, right now. And so as we examine that, we think about what do people really want in the workplace, and what is it going to take to get people back to work if they want to work, and what does work mean to people? And I started to really question, when we talk about job quality, whose perspective are we hearing from? Who are we listening to? The dominant worker in the workplace right now, it's the millennials and the boomers, which is really interesting because they have vastly different opinions about work and attitudes about work. And so the biggest place I always come to is just ask people. And so that's what I started to do, was ask colleagues and peers, job seekers and workers, what do you want in work? What's important to you in the workplace? And as we started to have those conversations, the biggest thing that has stood out was flexibility, as well as being able to show up to work and be show up as yourself. And so, Hamida, thanks for saying that earlier, to be able to show up as yourself. And I think those are important things, but also beyond pay, it's the flexibility when it comes to when I work and how I work, and what other supports do I have to make sure that I can get to work and stay in work at work. And then also, what are there opportunities for me to advance? A key piece that also stood out that I'm hearing is just the way that we look at credentials and experience and what we value in terms of what's considered education and what's considered valuable in the workplace. And so those are just a couple of things. I can dive into them a lot more deeply as, again, we're talking to states, we're talking to college institutions, we're talking to employers, and then again, like I said, job seekers. So I'll just put that out there for now, and happy to go deeper as we continue to talk.
And I'd love to jump in, and thank you for that. I want to touch on some of what Yodit kind of grounded us in, which is kind of moving back towards the relationship that our people had to labor before we were either invaded or colonized, and the idea of extraction. And so for myself, my relationship to labor has always been one where I felt extracted from. And so really examining the idea of extraction and examining the idea of what our relationships have been to everything, labor and everything outside of labor pre-colonization. So for me, in my role as the coordinator in the coalition, what we're trying to do is bring back this balance and this idea of reciprocity and regeneration in our relationships. And so that means relationship to everything living and relationship to all of the different systems that we interact with. And so a lot of what we do within the coalition is really pushing forward different types of structures and ways of existing so that we can still be sustained with our work, and at the same time feel like we're not being extracted from, so that we can survive. A reclamation and a redefinition of what labor is, really, is what we've been kind of focused on. And me, myself, looking at the idea of expanding that definition into the workers who are sustained are able to produce, right? And what are we producing that is then in relation to the balance that we exist in? So looking at labor and how labor impacts the environment and how the environment can impact labor, and how that relationship doesn't have to be so violent, and how it's been in this capitalist structure that we live in. So really focusing on cooperatives, on different ways where we can collaborate on labor, on different businesses, and ways of looking at entrepreneurship in a collective way, so that people can move forward with what they've been dreaming of. And so things like passions that they would wish that they could sustain themselves with become more reality. And then we find other community members who are also doing the same things or thinking of wanting to do the same things. And then we can work together and build that network out that way. The other thing is really thinking about the community in what do we need here? What kind of businesses might be necessary for us to sustain as an ecosystem? Can we practice food sovereignty? Can we practice different things where all of the things that the city may need to function can be accessed locally? What are the businesses that our community can create where we can be co-governing, co-managing, co-organizing, co-owning? And And so for us, it's really about completely restructuring, bringing in something new, and doing away with the bad, the thing that has been extractive for us for such a long time, pushing back on all of these things that make us feel so disconnected from our humanity, because labor has done that to us historically for so long. You know, I do come from an ancestry where we were enslaved. We just had Indigenous Peoples Day. My Taino people, which Columbus made contact with, put us right into labor, extractive labor. A lot of my people passed because of those things, whether it was through sex trade or through actual physical labor and mining. That's how our people kind of came into existence with that term, with that way. And before that, there was harmony. And so like Yodit was grounding us in that we're gonna have a different relationship to labor. And we are creating that every day. And that's been our major focus over the last 2 years.
Amazing, thank you. I'm just looking back at the question that, you know, many employers are struggling to retain staff and are reflecting on their work cultures. And, you know, from my perspective, I think this is probably a shared experience with a lot of people, but the pandemic has been very clarifying about several relationships that are going on under capitalism in our settler colonial state, but, you know, the binaries between the ownership class and the non-owning worker class, as well as between workers and management and boss. Those relationships, I think, have been made more transparent and kind of the inherent power structures that, you know, kind of like are seemingly maintained quite well when in times where things are a little bit more stable in our economy. But in times like this, I think people that are generally more privileged economically, as far as their middle class or upper middle class, that don't see kind of the things that maybe people on the other side of the binary experience, I think it's starting to become a little bit more clear for everyone. So that's been helpful. And then I think this time has also been clarifying for me as far as what would I like to see as far as changing workplace structures. And I've mentioned I've been in nonprofits for almost 20 years now. It's been home to me as far as feeling like my work was connected to my ideals. You know, these are some of the reasons why people get into this type of work. But if you talk to people that have been in those type of structures for a long time, you also hear kind of the same recurring problems. Yeah, that because your ideals are connected to the work, that sets you up for exploitation and for you know, probably workplace policies that might not support your whole humanity. So I think that, you know, that is one thing that definitely workplaces now, whatever iteration they're in, needs to do more of, which is just support people's full humanities, including their limitations, including their strengths, and working with that with rather than doing kind of prescriptive policy structures that try to make work uniform among everyone. And the other thing that I've been thinking about as far as labor in this time are about my own values as it relates to the other things I do outside of work. And my value system has always been about democracy, democratic values of everybody participating, everybody having a say, as well as self-determination. And because those are my values, I have tended towards thinking about more models that have economic democracy in mind. So like worker cooperatives are one thing that I've been thinking a lot about. You know, I have other friends and comrades in the area that are doing worker self-directed nonprofits. That's another type of model that has workers that are collectivized and making democratic decisions together about their labor. And, you know, like all the information that's out there right now is that places that have had these type of institutions for a long time, workplace satisfaction is so much higher. Even when there's times of work becoming more demanding for people in these type of structures of like worker nonprofits or worker cooperatives, in those spaces, people that are working members generally do okay in like high demand places because they have a say and they have autonomy and they have their values embedded and interwoven into the whole institution. So those are some of the things I've been thinking about. My experience in organizing also informs this in that I've been operating in kind of horizontal organizing spaces where, you know, there is no true leadership top-down model. It's very leaderful where everybody's kind of making decisions because they can see with their own eyes where the gaps are and they just come in and do it. And it works beautifully. It's very productive. It's highly satisfying and exciting space. So these are some of the experiences that I have that I want to bring more into our grind, because I do think that our, you know, work life should be fulfilling beyond just sustaining, you know, hopefully our basic needs at least. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I will start. Thanks.
Can I keep you off of mute for just a moment? Because I think you might be able to help with the follow-up kind of thought and question I had. I feel like we're kind of stuck betwixt and between the ideological and the practical. And I'm speaking, Amber, right now in my function as a leader at New. And I have been pushing on a lot of change, and I can see the fatigue among some of our team members. Some of it is resistance, which is normal in change, but others is just the breadth and the amount of change. And for me, it's almost like once you see it, you can't unsee it. So there's a sense of urgency of like, oh, like we need to not have these hierarchical management systems, and we need to change the, you know, like it started for me, just a quick anecdote, like when I first moved into a leadership role, we used to have the employee manual. And I learned from a local business, like, call it your team guidebook. So like that was when I got radicalized. I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then since then have been like slowly, but it feels, I think it feels for some like a lot of change. And I'll admit that we have been moving through change pretty consistently since like 2017. And so it's even worn on me a little bit. So there's the, like, when you're practicing these new ways of being, and then there are other instances where there's just an unwillingness to do and behave differently. You know, I was chatting with a prospective client that made all of their team come back to work. And I was like, why? You know, why did they need to come back? And we, you know, we had to delve into that. What would it mean for us when you talk about, you know, different models that we can use, and you talk about different cultures that we can create? I love the word leaderful. Like, I was like, how can we change all our titles to leaderful? But what would it mean to put sort of power? This is one part of the question, like power behind these ideas. What would it mean? What might it take? And I think the other thing that I've said to our team is, I'm not sure if we're not just tinkering in a broken system, right? And that weighs on me, Amber. I wonder if you and then any of our other panelists have any thoughts. You know, is it all just scorched earth and we need to, you know, like walk away? Or, you know, are these things you're seeing and describing to us, you know, can we fully realize them? What would it take? Not can we, but what would it take?
Yeah, And to the scorched earth comment, I would say it depends on who you talk to. But I am someone, I'm probably more optimistic where, you know, despite seeing kind of the same patterns over and over and over and over again, I'm still like, but you know, there's good people even within the present systems that we have. Maybe there is room to grow and change and adapt, and that, you know, reform can happen within these systems as well. And I'm not, I'm not opposed to exploring that as well, because even at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to, unless we have a revolution all of a sudden, but change these systems like overnight. So, you know, we'll have to have some sort of like transition anyway. And what I've seen talked about within like, because I know mostly about nonprofit structures, is it's possible to kind of change the structure within the nonprofit model to just include more workers, and that can be formalized in bylaws, or it could just be put into practice with some, you know, policy changes that you know, maybe consult with workers more before decisions are made kind of unilaterally. So I do think that's a possibility. I do this with in mind of like, usually when those type of things are happening, it's because there is a really great leader, progressive person that's in that leadership role, and they're creating like a good workplace culture. And so I've expressed this before, but it's my worry that when those great people that are in those roles as executive directors at nonprofits leave, it is always possible for things just kind of revert back to how it was, based on kind of the nonprofit structure being very similar to any type of business model. But I think even with bylaw tweaking, you know, some of those good values can remain, but it is always possible for it to kind of just like revert based on who's in those positions, what type of values they hold. Do they come from more conventional types of, you know, learning in nonprofit or management and things like that? So yeah, I would say like yes and no, both like these reforms can happen, but that, you know, the structure itself does inform kind of like the experience of workers.
I'll add a little bit to that. I think that it's yes and there's a lot of scorched earth that we have to identify and walk away from. And then there's a lot of beauty that we can build from. And I think that one thing that comes to mind is alchemy. We're alchemists. You know, we can, and we have been for millennia. We can honestly, one of the reasons why we're even here is because we've been able to come from nothing, take from nothing and turn it into something. And so I think that one of the most important things is to understand that it all comes from something that we already have foundationally in us. All of these terms that we speak in the languages that we have that were given to us or forced on us, we practiced these things before we knew them in this language. And so we are taking what we know that still works and then remixing it and making it functional so that the community has what it needs. And we're not, again, functioning under extraction. I think that direct democracy is a necessity in every step of every process of this. And I think that the more people that are involved in that process, it makes it that much more fulfilling and more sustainable. If you have community involved in each step of the process, the buy-in is already there. If you have community creating the work, creating the businesses, creating the ways in which we're gonna sustain ourselves, it's already there. And then ultimately, when you have a community seeing that transformation, that transition, you know, happen in a very just way, it will then continue that buy-in. When we do it, it's not just about a particular sector of workers. We're talking to youth. We are engaging our elders. It's a multi-generational, multicultural kind of space that we try to cultivate every time we have meetings, every time we have sessions for educational kind of purposes, whether it's a cooperation cafe meeting or something in relation to the land, at Urban Tilth, which is one of the farms in North Richmond. And so that's where really it comes from, really tapping into that idea that we all are alchemists. We all can make this change. And the people that we are in relation with, whether it is a work relationship or this living kind of ecosystem, they're all contributing to that. So how can we better source each other so that we can build out in a way that is going to be long lasting, long term, and ultimately in harmony with the land? It has to be that way.
I'll just add that I think change, depending on who's at the helm of an organization or not, it definitely has to be set by the tone and the culture of that organization. And what I mean by that is you can have an organization led by, like again, the dominant group in the workforce right now, like a white male baby boomer, male 60 plus. You can have it led by me, not 60 yet, female of color. And if that culture of that organization is still ingrained in the white dominant frame of view, things will continue in that way. And for me, I read an article, I can't remember, I have to look it up and I could send it later, but it was like the tanning of white supremacy. If anybody read that if we've been ingrained in that culture, we've adopted it, it's been forced, as Katt was saying, to others as well. And it's been what's considered norm. And it's hard to break free of what you know is norm and normal. And so it's gonna have to be a way where you start to recognize and point out what of this is an aspect of white dominant culture and where do we break away from that. And so it's identifying what that looks like and then realizing how do we change that and doing it in a way where it doesn't take 50 years to make the change either, because the voices of, like I said, the next generation of folks in the workforce that's dominant is our millennials. They're not quiet. They're also a very diverse population. They're not going to sit back and wait the 40 years for change to happen. They're very vocal. They'll say this is what needs to happen now. And workplaces have to quickly adjust to what they're saying is needed now. So disrupting the white dominant culture, again, no matter who's leading it, is going to have to be very, really looked at and analyzed. And I think a caution I would put out there is that we sometimes think just because the organization is led by a person of color or a woman that it's different, and it's not always that way. We have to be able to really identify where do we see issues where we don't see people persisting, what can we do to change it, and do it as a whole organization, and then also make sure that you're very clear about what those values are and that we do have consequences if folks don't follow those values and adjust with it. But I just want to say it's about culture and it's about changing culture quicker than what it's been done before, I guess is what I'd say.
Changing culture quicker than before, Kysha, that's really sticking with me. I mean, so in all the threads of Amber and Katt's and your responses, Kysha, what got me thinking is that kind of within some of our systems and some educational systems, there's such deep indoctrination of centering the workplace or that production or capitalist perspectives, that sometimes it might be hard for folks to be able to discern what is it that I truly want or need, if they perhaps haven't had a chance to even dream or think about what they want or need within the workplace, where the workplace has been that anchor that sort of defines possibilities rather than us as individuals, right? So I'm really curious. Can you help us think about ways that we can actually think about assessing the ways that we need work to center ourselves, to uplift our values, what our needs and wants towards self-determination can be, if we haven't really traveled that path or it's new for us? I imagine for some folks in this room, this might be sort of paradigm shifting. How can we kind of build those muscles to really center what we need and not center capitalist imperatives?
This one for me is really at the center of a lot of what I've done, both in my work and also just for me personally, is really, and I touched on it before, it's diving deeper into what we already know, what we already are a part of, that either has been moved away from us, removed from us in our history, disconnected from us in some way, that we used to practice, that our people practice, that was a natural way of us. And so connecting that back, right? We hear a lot of things in theories and in academics, platforms that we are already practicing. So it's really about getting back to those things, demystifying some of these things, and simplifying a lot of things that become complex in the society that we live in. Because if we can make it complex, that means that we can keep it away from people and we can commodify it. So decommodifying things is really part of that paradigm shift, making it open and accessible to people. And so
Now, hold up, because that just, come on. Say it one more time for the folks in the back.
Yes, we must decommodify. That is part of the process, because what has been done is the commodification for the purpose of profit, for the purpose.
And that's what Kysha is talking about with pedigree and us valuing the degree and the what have you over innate gifts, knowledge, wisdom, right? Absolutely. And then ordering and structuring it in a way that keeps some in and some out. That's a, honey.
As a parent, as a mom, I learned things from my newborn child that led me in my life in ways that anything I found in a book didn't. And so I think we have to realize that there's genius in everyone. And if we can create the spaces for them to show that genius, and like Hamida was saying, that we don't get that opportunity to dream, create those spaces where we can dream and have these conversations, and you're going to find that genius just pop and come out. And it may come out of the 4-year-old's mouth, or it may come out of the 40 or 50 or 60-year-old person's mouth. But that's all genius and that's all knowledge. And I think that when we can bring our cultural practices, some of our traditions into the space, those become part of that blueprint. And that blueprint, again, it's so much more sustainable because it comes from us. It is rooted in us. It's not something that we're learning new. It's not new. And once it's tapped into, what we create, what we can create is so magical and beautiful that it is rooted. It is rooted. And so that to me is really, how we do this.
Yeah, I totally agree. It took me back to the side note, watching a series called the Wu-Tang Clan. I'm a 90s hip hop fan, and there's a scene where they're looking at the contracts and stuff, and they're like, this is meant for us to not understand it, so that we can get taken, and so it's so true. A lot of things are meant to exclude you and not tell you the rules of the game. And it's so true. And one of the things that we're doing within my organization, one of the pillars of our work is looking at competencies and credentials and what matters when it comes to work. And again, as I'm talking to friends and peers, they're saying employers need to start, they say go back to the old ways where you train people on the job, and the earn and learn models and apprenticeship programs are so crucial right now. Looking at this population, we're not going to have enough people available to fill positions if we don't change up what we do now. We can't go by what's current today. It's not going to work now. And so we got to look at what's important in terms of what the person brings to them that may not be on paper, but they have other experiences and real skills that can be brought forth to the workplace. And we're finding now that employers are losing really good talent to other employers who have figured this out and can say, oh, they have the grounding pieces we need. I can teach them the rest. Or I'm going to validate this other experience and count it as a piece of what's needed for this work in terms of a competency. And we'll find that those employers are the ones that's going to thrive. The others are going to be left behind and really scrambling to figure out what they need to do. And I think that's something, yeah, again, it isn't new. That's something that the BIPOC populations have been saying for a long time. It's not always what's on paper. It's what I know and it's what I can do. But the credential is the shiny piece of paper that has been so valued in society. And I think it's just I'm laughing because it's like, again, we've been saying this for years and it's really coming back now harshly. It's backfiring in a lot of sectors and a lot of employers, and they've got to get on board quickly unless they're going to start vanishing. But the sad part of it is that we'll all suffer. And so it's not just that employer that might not be here, but some of those necessities and some of those comforts that we're used to having aren't going to be there because society has been too late to get on the bus and toward in terms of thinking about the value of experience, the value of what people can bring when it does not look like what's traditional. So.
You know, we had all these questions, and Katt, I'm gonna say this aloud because you inspired it. So much of how I move in the world is on an inkling or a spark that happens in my body. And in this moment, what my body and what spirit said is, rather than ask y'all another of our questions, is like, let me offer, what are you holding right now that the people in this room should hear or that you would want them to hear? We have another, 10 minutes or so of hearing from you. And then I think we want to hear the invitations and demands you would offer and a little bit of time for Q&A. So if, Adrienne Marie Brown says, what's the conversation only the people in this room can have? And so I just want to put that invitation. What's on your heart now that you want folks to hear? And Amber, I'll start with you if that's okay. And then we'll go to Katt and then Kysha.
It's very thoughtful. So I'm going to think. The first thing that is coming to mind, because you were all talking on the topic of productivity, is just that our lives are so ruled by this compulsory productivity that is engendered into our culture on every level, from preschool till now. And it's such a intense construct of our life that it's hard for me to even really step us out of that. But I think that is a worthwhile pursuit, to take a look at your life and your loved one's life and really understand what is important. And compulsory productivity is, I think, something that we try to normalize in the effort to say, like, our worth is attached to how much we do. It might not be our 9-to-5 jobs, but outside of that, it's even like, are we doing enough yoga this day? Are we planning enough, you know, epic trips that are going to impress like our social media feeds, and it just kind of enters every space. And so, you know, I'm trying to understand what it would be like to not work within those parameters and instead, center just like pleasure and joy and connection with the people that I care about, while doing work that is important and needs to be done for society to go on, but should be another aspect of life instead of like the center and focal point of everything. And I think this probably doesn't diverge too much, but I think, you know, workplaces would benefit from restructuring around those ideas as well, because you probably will get more productivity in a shorter amount of time if we are just honoring people's time outside of work as much as we are trying to prioritize like how much we can get out of them inside of work. And you know, besides, you know, giving folks more space to be who they are in their whole self, giving people the power to actually make decisions that affect their lives in the workplace and outside of the workplace. So bringing more people into decision making in democratic terms, that is kind of like what I hope some of the takeaway is from this space.
I'll jump in. Honestly, I really, if nothing else is taken away, is really about the importance of relationships. Our relationship to the land, our relationship to each other, but more and probably most importantly is our relationship to ourselves, because I think that we have a lot of internal work to do that when we don't do it, it's going to, no matter what, impact the community that we are in relation with. It's going to impact the employers that we may have. It's going to impact the employees that we have. It's going to impact every space that we're in. And so really, honestly and truly, thinking about our relationships to ourselves, to the land that we interact with, and to the people that we're in communion with. And then cultivate safety in those spaces every day, every time you can, in every way that you can. Breathe that into that space. That is really the only way that we change this. These relationships are super important. And when you can see the people that you're in relation to, when you can see them and affirm them, it changes everything. It changes absolutely everything. If I walk into my place of work and I am seen as the whole human that I am, productivity isn't even an issue, because I'm dedicated and I'm loyal and I'm ready, because I'm seen and I'm held in that space. And that has to be the relationship that every person has. So that's how I see it. That's what I'm feeling when you ask me that question, Yogi.
And that's why I love you. Come on, Kysha.
I would just say that it's really that we're in this together is what I'm feeling, that no one can be left behind anymore. And if we continue to think that way, it just harms us all. And folks are not going to stay behind. And I guess it's the sense of urgency in me too, that for some really got catapulted last summer with the murder of George Floyd. And I think some people felt that urgency, but it's the urgency that, again, my grandparents had when they got on that train. They were like, we want some independence, we want some freedom, we want to be seen and valued. And it's right in front of us now, as things have shifted so much in workforce, with workers saying, I'm not coming back, or I've decided that my life is more to it than that, and I'm gonna start my own business. Or we can live off of one income and think differently about how we spend our money. So many choices and decisions about life is happening right now for so many people. And if we don't figure out what motivates people, what their story is, incorporating their voice into how they think about work and how they want to spend their life, then really it's an economic peril that we're in, and we all are in it together, and we have to find out solutions together, is how I'm feeling.
You know, what you sparked for me, Hamida, if I can have just a couple minutes, is when you said we can't let anybody fall, right? Like, we can't leave anybody behind. And then the ways in which Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder were, and Ahmaud, and so many were a catalyst. And one of my, when Amber said she was optimistic, I had a little, like, because I want to be, and then there are things that just take you out, right? And it's the despair that Kaba spoke of. But what you bring me to, Kysha, the thought that came in my mind that I just want to offer to our group is that we are all impacted by these systems, regardless of the constructed racial identities that we carry. Surely some of us experience the impact more acutely, but as long, the invitation that is here is to heal from the violence that pervaded everybody, every soul, every corner of this country and this earth, and that we've got to move, if we're going to leave no one behind, that healing, right? It has to be more of a focus on healing our own relationship to that violence, each of us, right? And in collective care. This is that space. But if you know, what's that quote? If you have come here to help me, right? I can't recall it off the top of my head, but basically the help piece has got to come from up underneath the healing piece, right? That we are all healing. The reason we do racial equity or racial justice work is to heal, right? It's not to make us feel good or to check a box or to perform love, right? When we really love, we heal. And I hope that folks will hear and receive that. And I thank you, Kysha, for sort of putting it out there that what I know to be true is that every absolute time Black and brown bodied folk have gotten free, we all have, right? And so let us heal. Let us hear what you said. Oh, I don't want it to end. Come on, go ahead, Hamida, get us together.
Hey, we're already together, right? We're just hearing a little bit more of an extension, and thank you, Yodi. Healing is such an integral part of this. What I do ask our speakers to share with us is what demands or invitations do you have of us as community members, as folks who do want to do this work, as we move forward and create this more sort of really humanistic, human-centered, in some ways realistic workplaces. What do you demand of us?
I'll just start it off. A couple of things I had was really connects back to what I said about culture. And for me, it's because I have worked in white dominant cultures. I worked in manufacturing, I worked in higher education, and now I'm in nonprofit. But the cultures have been pretty similar. The one I'm in now, I will say, and thanks, and we partnered with Yodi and her organization to really look at putting a mirror up to a culture and really identifying where do we see aspects of white dominant culture being pervasive, and we were blocking out other cultures to persist and exist in great ways. And so for me, I am deeply concerned and passionate about identifying white dominant culture in workforce organizations and in the way that we do our work in terms of the advice and strategy and policy that we provide around workforce and skill development. And so there's variations of this, and Yodi and her team has shared pieces around white supremacy culture and identifying, it's the either or thinking, or is it the being more of a communal thinking, and who holds power and all those sorts of things. And so an article by Tima, is it Okun, I can't say it correctly, and Kenneth Jones really outlines a lot of those perspectives in terms of thinking about organization, how it operates, and the practices within. And so for me, it would be asking and having you examine how your culture is showing up in workplaces. Is there room and space for other cultures, again, to exist and persist in a way that people can thrive? And so how inclusive is your organization? And I say inclusive, that's what I'm talking about in terms of culture. And then I'd also want to challenge organizations to think about the needs that I'm hearing from job seekers and peers around flexibility in the workplace. And how do you accommodate for that? And how do you ensure that the perspective about when we define job quality is not just coming from, again, the dominant culture within the workplace, that we're including the voices of new workers and others in the workplace about what they need and want in the workplace. And so those are the couple of, I guess, sharing and acts that I would offer to the group today.
I'll go ahead and hop in and let Amber round it out for us. Two things I think that I want us to really focus on is to push back on the edges of the structures that we exist in now so that they benefit our working people, our labor people, our folks that are working. And what I mean by that is there are certain legal things that we have to abide by, but how can we push back all the way onto the edge of those things so that it benefits us? So does that mean that we have to restructure so that people can be part of the direct democracy process? Does that mean then, helping create the space so that people can redefine what their labor actually looks like? Really open up and expand the idea of labor, because labor doesn't start when we clock in, right? Labor starts when we get up and get ourselves ready and get ourselves either in some form of transportation and get ourselves there, right? But that's not sustained. Me waking up at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning to get to a job, right? And only get paid for the amount of time that I'm physically there. We got to think about restructuring and opening and expanding that, because my labor started when I got up in the morning so I can get ready to go to work. So thinking about restructuring and doing that. And then having within the structures of your job place, things like a wellness fund for employees, where they have access to therapy, or at least funding reimbursement for therapy, access to different types of healers that are part of their cultures and traditions. Have those things accessible to the people that are working, because when they, again, are sustained, productivity isn't an issue. When they are seen as their whole selves, productivity isn't an issue. When you can reduce someone's stress level, productivity becomes a lot less of an issue. And so things like a wellness fund, thinking about if you're receiving funding from different entities, how those entities can push up against the legal structures that are keeping us from access, right? So all of those types of things, wherever you can make a difference to push against the things that are oppressing us, do it. And if you can't do it, find the people that are doing it and support them so that we can change all of this, because it's little pockets and silos of us doing it is fine for a finite amount of time. But in order for us to really change this and transition this, we have to be doing it everywhere. We have to be doing it everywhere and connecting everywhere and have that interwoven kind of process so that it changed the entire structure. Because it's oppressive. And as Kysha was saying, those white supremacist kind of functions within the structure are what continue if we don't push against it and change it and fight it all the time.
So I think I will kind of continue with Kysha's statement about not leaving anyone behind. In that, I think two things come to mind. Those folks that might be in the chat right now that are doing or participating in some sort of DEI work at their organization. I think that work is good, but I also want to just understand what the motivation and intention behind it is, because if the motivation and intention is really to transform your organization to be more inclusive, that is truly radical and transformative. That means that people that are most marginalized in our labor force stand to benefit the most, and it is worthwhile work. But if your motivation is just to kind of like it's the label of an organization doing DI work and benefiting from that without really changing things, then I don't think that is kind of honoring the idea of not leaving anyone behind. Black women, brown women, women of color, transgender women stand to benefit the most from actually being included in these spaces, and especially and when you think of democratic ownership or democratic lead in spaces like this. So as far as like trying to transform the grind is in these kind of like wonky ways where we're trying to, okay, maybe we'll try like a little bit less hours during a work week, or maybe more support in these various ways, or maybe like a wellness group. Like I definitely support those things. I think those can be helpful and good, but my thought is you don't even have to worry about that. If you bring in more people that are providing the labor in your agency into decision-making positions, and really like everyone into some level of decision-making, everything else will be figured out. We will naturally have better, workplace conditions and policies because workers know what they're experiencing, what they need. Maybe they'll determine they need a 38-hour work week, or they need, specific family and child care needs met. But I don't think that it needs to be finagled in a way that is difficult or some kind of like magic key. It really is, the magic key is like democratic, worker directed workspaces.
Kysha, Katt, Amber, thank you so much. The magic key is really worker directed spaces. That is so powerful to close with. So I want to uplift another opportunity to continue this conversation if you're a nonprofit leader. So at New, when we were really thinking about having this conversation, we want to stoke what it means to dream of something different. And we also want to help folks think about, so how do I do that? So in the chat, I shared information for our next Leading and Learning for nonprofit leaders. Our next session is going to be Help Wanted, the nonprofit sector and changing employee trends. How do we actually work to implement those changes that we talked today within structures, right? So really, I would love for you to take a gander at that and sign up. And as our speakers were bestowing us with some incredible nuggets of wisdom, I went and collected some key terms that were coming up and phrases that were coming up for us. So I'll close with this, and then Carly, if you could share a survey after, that'd be amazing. Thank you. So let this radicalize you rather than lead you to despair. Center your perspectives when reflecting on the qualities of work you desire. Seek reciprocity and regeneration in relationships. Remember the interrelation between labor and environment. Consider your relationships to the land, each other, and most importantly, yourself. We are all called to heal our relationship to this collective violence. When we love, we heal. Notice each other. That noticing grows dedication, love, and loyalty. Leave no one behind. Create space to make your passions reality. Ask yourself, what do you want? What do you need? Uplift what you already know. What can you decommodify? Ground this work in structures, not only staff. Build a culture that is genuinely inclusive. Align your values with action to claim your self-determination. Push against hierarchy when you can. Be leaderful. Let us all be deciders. We must weave together our strengths and knowings to change structures. We are going to have a different relationship to labor, and we co-create that. There's genius in everyone. It's already rooted in us. Thank you so much for joining us today for Centering Justice. This is so essential given all of the changes that we have been experiencing and undergoing in just seeing the different ways in which we are called to make changes. Both new changes or changes we've already been making. So thank you so much for investing time with us. And for those of you who are nonprofit leaders, we hope to see you at Leading Learning so we can co-plan what this really means. I also want to uplift that Carly is sharing a survey in the chat. And I want to be upfront in that sometimes I groan when I hear surveys and I don't take them, right? So let me ground a little bit about what this is going to help us do. So really my hope is that we get to co-create some of this too, right? So we get to hear from you what would be most helpful for you for our next time together. What topics are really burning for you for this session? What went well that you're like, damn, they got to do that ish again? And what session didn't go well? And you're like, I would really love if they stopped that. But I really think about how in the spirit of inclusion, right? I mean, I can come up with ideas all the time. I'm an Aries, y'all. I'm opinionated. But I think about the importance of including and creating avenues for folks to share and really express what you want, some of what we talked about today. So please take a few moments to complete this survey.